have the latest on Hurricane Idalia, but let's start by taking a look outside Joe Campbell Stadium. It's starting to get dark out, all right? It's starting to get a little stormier out, and that's going to continue as conditions continue to deteriorate over the next few hours. We've got a lot of time to kind of start making our final preparations as Idalia starts to close in. Now taking a look over downtown Tampa, where we've already started to see some of the outer bands start to move in. We'll notice some darker skies, more clouds. This is Clearwater Beach. Taking a look, lots of rain on the lens, lots of dark clouds, as Idalia is starting to make a close pass to you as well. This is in Cedar Key, where a little bit ago we saw some of the stronger storms move through. Now we're starting to see a lot of strong storms start to push their way out of the area. So let's take a look at the Atlantic as a whole. We've got Idalia, of course, churning in the Gulf of Mexico as a Category 1 hurricane. We've got Hurricane Franklin, which recently got downgraded from a Category 3 to from a Category 4 to a Category 3. We've also got brand new Tropical Depression 11 out churning in the Atlantic, as well as this area over here that has about 20% chance of development over the next 2 days, 50% over the next 7 days. So taking a look at the spaghetti models together, let's take a look at them and take a closer look at them. They're in pretty tight agreement to start, and the latest run of the spaghetti models has been bringing these models closer and closer to a landfall in Leon County and Jefferson County and some of the more local counties to us. So as we move through the day, we'll really start to notice where these storms, or where Idalia is starting to make a closer pass to us here in some of the Big Bend regions of Central Florida. The official National Hurricane Center track has it becoming a Category 3 storm prior to landfall, and then crossing through Georgia and the Low Country, and then kind of re-entering the Atlantic over South Carolina, North Carolina. But again, 120 mile per hour winds is the projected landfall wind speed, and we've also got to deal with some of the effects of Idalia as it makes landfall in the Big Bend region of Florida. So again, let's take a look at future radar. This is using the IBM graph model, and if that played a little quick, I'll play it again for you. It's got Idalia kind of making landfall east of Tallahassee, kind of in Jefferson and Taylor counties, and then by about 1:30 tomorrow, it's starting to work its way out of the area. The IBM graph model has done a great job historically when tracking Ian and Nicole, so that's why I put this model in. And then as we get later into the day tomorrow, a couple of lingering showers and storms will stick around, but overall, Idalia is still trying to get itself together. We'll notice it's just right there that it's starting to try again eye together. Let's take one more look at right there. An eye is an indication that it's trying to strengthen, and it does look like Idalia is starting to get some sort of an eye together. As the aircraft is flying in, let's take a look and see what they're finding. I don't think they're out there right now, but again, with the wind speeds, we're going to have some pretty strong winds entering the Big Bend region come later on in the day today into tomorrow. Again, let's replay that wind speed. A strong hurricane is going to be entering the Big Bend region, something that we've never seen here in the Big Bend region before. And our rainfall forecast is showing lots of yellows and reds. And I want to also note that this rainfall forecast really, and the wind forecast as well, depends on where Idalia goes. If Idalia goes a little further to the west within the cone, we're going to see more of the rainfall further west. If Idalia starts to make a closer pass to, say, Levi County, that's where we're going to start to notice some of the rain push its way further to the east, as well as the wind push its way to the east. So it really does matter on where Idalia makes rainfall. Right now, Idalia is off screen, but we're taking a look at some of the outer bands working its way through southwest Florida, approaching Tampa, some heavy downpours starting to push their way through. So for current watches and warnings, almost all of the peninsula finds themselves under either a hurricane watch or a hurricane warning. For the most part, that being hurricane warnings, especially for us here in Tallahassee through the Big Bend. We're also going to be looking at down into Hernando, Pasco, Pinellas County in the Tampa area. So water vapor imagery shows both with Franklin and with Idalia some very strong convective, lots of moisture to go around, and then we've also got our steering current that's going to be coming in later on today. I'm going to pass things over to Aaron, who's got more on models with with Hurricane Idalia.
That's right. I do have more with models, but first we'll start off with just how unprecedented this system actually is going to be here as it makes its landfall and its track towards the Big Bend. Now, the Weather Service in Tallahassee here actually provided a pretty good graph that's kind of depicting on exactly how unprecedented this is actually occurring, because we've never actually yet seen a major hurricane make landfall in the Big Bend of Florida. So again, this is very historic. We're watching history in the making here. Unfortunately, I might add too, because we don't want this. We never really wanted this, but unfortunately, it's going to happen here probably within the next 24 hours or so. But kind of going out here, take out this F11 here, and we'll go towards tropical tidbits here just to kind of show, kind of forecast, or kind of showcase exactly what the models are thinking here. So as of right now, we're looking at perhaps the 18Z cluster of models are kind of more tightly clustered here, just between Cedar Key and St. Mark's, roughly, just about just off to our east here. So that would, in other words, if the center of circulation does kind of follow this cluster here, that would put us just on the western eye wall side, which is, of course, is not good. And I'm not saying that we're going to be in the eye wall. All I'm saying is that there's a potential for that given this track here. So that would mean that we would have an offshore wind, but again, at least tropical storm force conditions expected, perhaps gusting up the hurricane force, at least with this particular track. Unfortunately, what this track too also brings is that storm surge threat really from about Cedar Key, most of Cedar Key down through about Naples here. We have the biggest storm surge threat, where we have all this onshore wind here pulling it from Tampa, Naples, Fort Myers, all the way up through about the Cedar Key area, and that's where we're perhaps seeing that life-threatening storm surge possible. Not to mention, too, with the rainfall, also could add to some of that localized flooding in some of the estuary and some of the outlets where these rivers kind of meet the bay there, or any of these bays here in the Gulf of Mexico. So again, really concerning what's going on. And kind of looking at some of the actual operational guidance here. So this is the GFS, or the American model here, as of the 12Z run. So a little bit ago, the 18Z run should be running here pretty soon. This takes a pretty strong hurricane right into the Big Bend, and again, we're right there. Like we're almost where the L's at. That's not a good situation to be in. So that's why we want to stress here that this storms, especially as it gets closer, could wobble either direction. It could wobble in our favor or not in our favor. So that's something we have to watch as well as we progress over the next several hours or so. We'll also pull up the European model while we're at it too, just to kind of show what it's showing for the 12Z run. Pretty close to the European model, showing it pretty much just off to our east here, with putting the worst of the weather here just along the eastern portions of the eye. But again, that could wrap around, and we would be in this scenario, if this were to verify, that would put us in that pretty nasty western side as well. But again, which could be just as impactful, at least within the eye wall, as the eastern side. So again, we want to stress that again, these models are going to be coming in throughout the next several hours or so. They might do a tad bit to the east or the west possibly, but again, we're not talking about widespread changes, unfortunately. That, of course, that means that we're kind of already we're showing a pretty solid, relatively solid forecast in terms of where it'll make landfall in the Big Bend somewhere. But as in terms of exactly if it's going to be St. Mark's or Cedar Key, that's still kind of up for debate. And again, the cone does depict that it can still land anywhere within that. So if we go back towards the National Hurricane Center here, and we'll kind of track the cone as well, the interactive cone, it shows that, again, the storm can make landfall anywhere just near Levy County all the way through about Wakulla County here, as of the 11, at least the 11 a.m. cone. This is going to update here in about the next hour or so with a new track, which I'm assuming, at least my guess is it's not really going to change very much here. But again, anywhere within this cone here is fair game. You never want to look at the center of the cone and think it's going to go there. The cone depicts where the center of circulation will fall into within that certain time period, about 2/3 of the time. So again, it's a highly statistical probability of where it would make landfall. But again, anywhere really between the kind of the very northern tip of Appalachia Bay all the way through about just northwest of Homosassa Springs near Levy County. So again, anywhere in this area is fair game. And the worst of the storm surge is going to be pretty much anywhere where the storm makes landfall and just off towards the east. That's where we're going to see the worst of risk, at least in terms of storm surge over the next coming hours as it makes landfall there near the area. We will look at storm surge inundation too, to kind of show what we're forecasting, or the Hurricane Center is actually forecasting for that storm surge probability. So again, the biggest risk is going to be right here where you see these reds, these oranges and blues in coastal Levy County over towards, again, further up north in the Big Bend. This is where we're expecting to be at least the most catastrophic storm surge, at least at this current time with the forecast track. Really anywhere, again, north of Pasco, Hernando, Citrus County, really Citrus County up through about Levy County is probably going to be the bullseye of it. But again, that could switch a little bit off to the west or the east. So that, again, any little wobble can at least do that. So this is definitely, I wouldn't say this is 100% set in stone at this point. This is pretty close to that, but not 100% at this point. Again, we really want to watch that and really say that, at least here on FSU Weather, that there are going to be very slight, subtle differences in the track over the next coming hours, but it's not something to really keep your head up in terms of any significant changes we might expect here across much of the Big Bend. But we're going to send things off to the wall with Robert.
Alrighty, thank you, Aaron. We are now going to go from an overview of the storm to now look at specifically what's going on with Idalia as it makes its way closer towards the northern Florida coast. At 4:12, we still have the storm off the coast of Florida. It's still moving off towards the east, and we have this sort of shape in here. It's trying to clear out that eye and form that eye wall. As of now, hasn't gotten to that point yet, but once it can, then it'll really start strengthening, and that's the part we're concerned for. All the rest of these bands wrapping around the storm, carrying some heavy rain, some strong winds, some gusty conditions in there if you're out on the Gulf right now. Not a good time to be out in the Gulf at the moment, but even these outer bands towards Fort Myers, Miami, Key West, seeing some really heavy rain, and this is going to create some possibly localized flooding conditions as you get into the next few days. Also, storm surge a concern as this storm moves northward and pushes a lot of water with it. It will areas like Fort Myers and Tampa got to be a little bit concerned about a storm surge risk, and particularly as we get closer towards the northern Florida panhandle for that possibly 10 to 15 feet. But even in the Tampa Bay area, seeing as much as 5, even more feet of storm surge, that will have, doesn't sound like a lot, 5 feet, but just imagine a person standing up at 5 feet tall. That's a lot of water pushing into these populated areas in Pinellas County and St. Petersburg and Clearwater and Tampa that are right on the bay. Even if the storm doesn't make landfall, you'll see a lot of direct impacts from that storm surge. But let's zoom back out again and see where the storm is in relation to its landfall point. We think it will be somewhere close to the Florida Big Bend, maybe even closer to Tallahassee, that area up there off towards the north and east here. We're still over 200 miles from the storm, so it still has a lot of way to go to get here, but it will clear that. Almost 300 miles, 276 from the coast up here. It will clear that within the next 12 to 15 hours. It's going to be making its way there, and that time period is crucial for the storm's development, for how strong it will get. Right now, it's just below Category 2 strength. We have another advisory coming out at 5 p.m., and we could see maybe even a little bit extra strength there. As it continues, it will continue to strengthen. Cat 2, we're expecting to get to a Cat 3 before it gets to Tallahassee. The importance of that is it will be the first major hurricane to make landfall in the northern Florida Big Bend area in recorded history since at least 1950, that there was a storm that made its way closer to Cedar Key. But in the immediate Appalachia Bay, Big Bend area, there hasn't been a storm that's been a major hurricane since the 1800s. So this is the first time we've seen a storm this strong in a while in this area. And some of you might be thinking, well, that's weird. I remember Hurricane Michael made its way up here back only in 2018. It was a Category 5. That's true. But if you could zoom out a little more here and show us this area west of here, at Panama City, that area, that's where we saw that area impacted by Hurricane Michael. This storm is looking like it's going to make its way over here. Doesn't seem like a lot when I zoom it out here, but that's over 200 miles of difference there. This area really did not see that many impacts from Hurricane Michael. Most definitely did not see Category 5 conditions from Hurricane Michael. So that's important to remember as you see the storm moving its way in that direction there. So let's go to what we call an IR satellite product here. That will help us see how strong the storm is at the moment. So if we can zoom in right here, and I'll be able to point out some features from the storm we're really watching. So this is the area we're looking for, that central area of the development of the storm, where we see these charcoal colors and red colors. That's the strongest area of intensity of those storms. The higher these cloud tops, that's what we're looking for here. The darker colors are the higher your heights of clouds. The higher the height of the cloud, that means it's a stronger storm. So these stronger storms in the middle here of this storm are really starting to wrap around the center here. What we're looking for is a clearing out of the middle. Once we see this eye start to clear out, and we've seen it try to form over a little bit over the last few hours here. Hasn't been very successful yet, but we're seeing a little bit in the way of that eye starting to try and clear out here. Once it does, that will help it strengthen further and take advantage of all this warm water it has, this extra runway it has, all the way up into the Big Bend. So if we can zoom out a little bit and we'll look at some of these outer rain bands, and this is a really good way to show how these outer rain bands, even as far as Orlando and even Daytona Beach, are still really connected to this large system here. You're seeing impacts from it as far as there. That's why we have a tropical storm warning in effect for the eastern coast of Florida, even though the storm is making landfall in the Florida Panhandle and the western coast. So it's important that we have these impacts, important to know, excuse me, that we have these impacts far from the center of the storm, and some of these far outer rain bands not really directly associated with the storm as much, but they do still bring some of that rain to areas like Tallahassee, where we are not likely to see direct impacts from the storm here for another few hours, but these are just some storms that we're watching. So if we could actually go back to, or first before we go to radar, let's go to visible here so we can see the progression of that eye. And right here, this is this dense area of overcast weather that we're looking for. And if we could zoom in a little further, I actually do see what looks like a little bit of a pinhole starting to develop there. Right in there, we'll wait for this area to pass through here. But you're seeing this area right in here looks like a little bit of an eye starting to develop. And if we could actually pause this in the newest frame here, that would help us really sort of dig deep into what is happening here. But you can really see that on that last frame where it's really starting to clear out that eye. And that just shows you that the storm is intensifying as it's moving its way towards the north, unfortunately. We don't want to see this happen. This is what we really didn't want to see this eye start to form, because that would mean that it's still struggling with all this shear and all this development in here. But we do know that it is still struggling with that as it continues to develop. So again, on this newest frame here, I'm going to point it out once we get there. You can really see that sort of notch right in this area right there. That's where that eye is developing, and we'll continue to see that as we go into the future, as the storm continues to develop with this warm water here. So again, this is what we see from the visible satellite, just looking at the cloud structure from far atop the storm, really just showing you what this system looks like, and it's starting to get that classic hurricane look. So let's go over to now the wall, and we'll have more details about the setup of the storm and what reports and evacuation orders we have in effect.
That's right. We want to start off with evacuation orders here. This is from the FloridaDisasters.org website here, Division of Emergency Management here in Florida. So current evacuation orders, again, you also want to look at your local county evacuation orders as well for more detail, more information about exactly what they're asking for during these evacuation orders. But just kind of off the top here, we have Alachua County under a voluntary evacuation order. Baker County is well under a voluntary evacuation order as well. Citrus County is under mandatory evacuation for all of Zone A, which includes everything west of U.S. Route 19. So again, if you're in Zone A in Citrus County, you want to make sure you leave right now, because you're under the risk, especially in that area, of seeing very significant storm surge from the system. Again, this is very historical what's going on right now. Dixie County and Franklin County also under mandatory orders as well. And you kind of going down the list here, Gulf County, Gilchrist County, Hamilton County under a voluntary. But again, you want to make sure you look at your local county, or at least emergency management website, for more information in terms of what your evacuation zone is, what your flood zone is, and also what exactly they're asking in terms of orders, whether it's voluntary or mandatory. Because unfortunately, once the winds get up there, or if there's any type of storm surge, and you call for help for first responders, they may not be able to get to you during the storm. So that's why we're really trying to hone in on the message here that it's better to leave right now while you can before the storm gets here than being trapped, and unfortunately nobody will be able to save your life. That's why this is really catastrophic. Why the Weather Service and all of us here in the meteorology enterprise want to stress that you run from water, you hide from wind. So again, refer to your local county emergency management website for the latest on exactly where we're going to see those evacuation orders in place. But kind of switching gears here towards web cameras. So this is off a weather stem here near Sarasota County, showing those little water droplets on the lens of the camera indicating that we have rain starting to fall in portions of southwest Florida and into central Florida too, as these rain bands begin to continue on to move towards the north and the west or so, kind of spiraling around Hurricane Idalia. And this is the radar. The latest radar we're showing here is we have a pretty, at least that band is kind of coming around here, pivoting around the center of Idalia and going towards the Tampa Bay region, kind of extending and arcing down towards Florida Bay to near the Keys. Anywhere along this band, you could see some squally weather, inland or along the coast. So you do not want to be out there on the boat or do anything at this point. By the time this band comes through, you want to be already situated what you're going to do. Enact that hurricane plan. Make sure you stay indoors because, again, even though these storms are not in the actual center of circulation here, the eye wall, you could still get these really strong, powerful wind gusts and these wind squalls. So you want to be very careful with that. Not to mention, too, the threat of actually some severe weather, too. We've actually already had a tornado warning effect for portions of Collier County earlier, but again, we could see plenty of those, especially in the northeastern quadrant of Idalia. That's where we have the greatest wind shear potential, and that's where we could see the storms rotate briefly and spawn a quick tornado or two over a span of areas, and then move in, of course, as this does move over, continue to move over the rest of West Florida. So we want to stress this out. It's not just a hurricane event, too, wind event. It's not just a wind event, but it can also be a water event with storm surge and also a severe weather event with tornadoes potential as well. Like I said, we've already had a tornado warning in effect for portions of near Collier County. So again, we're expecting to see more of those as we continue on throughout the rest of the next few hours and overnight and into tomorrow morning when Idalia makes landfall. And even past that too, it could even go and cause some issues and some ruckus over towards the Carolinas and Georgia as well after this. But for right now, you want to make sure you stay huddled in. Basically, all in Southwest Florida, you want to already wrap those plans up already in terms of what you're going to do with those hurricane supplies and such. So besides that, we'll kind of show you the latest here in Tallahassee. Again, this is an unprecedented event ongoing right now across the Big Bend. We've never seen a major hurricane make landfall here across Appalachia Bay since records began back in the 1850s. This really is a truly historical event. Why we want to stress that this is not exactly the same as previous storms, as there never was a previous storm, at least on record, that have made landfall here, at least as a major hurricane in Appalachia Bay. So that's why we want to stress enough. This is a very serious storm. It is currently rapidly intensifying, at least that's what it's projected to do, and as it makes its way towards the Big Bend coast with the potential for really catastrophic storm surge, wind, especially right around that where the eye wall is at where eventually we'll make landfall. So we'll pass things over toward the wall with Ryan.
Yeah, and I just want to share something I just got on my phone about a minute ago, is that the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office and the Department of Emergency Management has actually issued a mandatory evacuation for those in mobile homes, trailers, structurally compromised housing. So for those of you that live in Jefferson County that find yourself in a mobile home, now is the time to get out before it gets worse, because we want to, keep you safe, and your local authorities know much better about the area than we do, much better about what is the safest way to get out. And Jefferson County, again, just said, now is the time to evacuate if you find yourself in that situation. So let's kind of walk back and look over everything. This is, again, at Doak Campbell Stadium. Look how dark it's gotten. Just over Doak, how dark and just ominous looking it has gotten over the last little bit. When we first kind of started this, it was a little more sunny, not as many dark clouds, and now we're really starting to see some of those dark clouds work their way in. The Atlantic is active. We've got Idalia, we've got Category 3 Hurricane Franklin, and then we've also got a 20% chance of development off this system in Africa, and we've got Tropical Depression 11, which is just kind of hanging out. But again, the main concern right now is Idalia, who's got 90-mile-per-hour winds and is going to be working its way towards the Big Bend. And again, it can go anywhere within this cone. The center of it can go anywhere within this cone. And the effects of it can go way beyond this cone. So don't get hung up on where is the cone. Oh, I'm not in the cone. Get hung up on it can so impact me no matter where it goes in this cone. If it goes a little further west, we're going to see more impacts to the east of the cone. Anywhere in the peninsula, anywhere in the panhandle, can feel the effects of Hurricane Idalia. as it starts to make landfall as a potentially Category 3 hurricane this evening. Again, I will pass off to Robert for one last look at the forecast.
Right, thank you so much. We are looking at this storm, and generally we have a really serious situation starting to develop with all of this storm that's developing. As we see it moving north, it's gaining some strength here. This is the photo of Cedar Key that we saw from about an hour ago. We're starting to see some of these stronger storms in the outer bands starting to make its way into the area we believe will be the most severely impacted by the storm, which is that Big Bend area, basically from the Appalachia Bay, from St. George's Island all the way east to Cedar Key, and including the city of Tallahassee, looks to be the area that will be most severely impacted by this storm as we continue to move throughout the night. And really, the period we're watching the most for is into that Wednesday period. And as we move into Wednesday early morning into Wednesday afternoon, as we start to see this storm make landfall. Here is the center of Idalia as it makes its way north and east. But we do have some outer bands that are really having a bit of an impact here, including one of these storms that's right near Miami that is a severe thunderstorm warning. So if you're just southwest or southeast area of Miami, southeastern part of Florida, that area is going to be under a warning. Homestead, anywhere in that area, you do need to be careful when you're driving outdoors, and if you can, go indoors, because these can be some really gusty winds, some really strong storms, and they can carry a tornado risk, which is important to know, particularly with these storms here. Not always a thought for people in Florida. You really focus on the storm surge and the heavy winds, heavy rain, strong winds, but we can see that tornado risk with some of these storms. So here is the general setup here as it moves towards the north. Spaghetti model is really keying in on this landfall somewhere in the Big Bend, and it looks like Tallahassee is in the crosshairs, unfortunately. Most of the impact, most of the eye wall is likely to be to the east of the city, but the impacts will be felt much wider than that, including the city of Tallahassee up towards around the area. A very large radius will likely see impacts. So if you're anywhere in the area, you will likely need to be taking shelter as soon as possible, getting all your last final supplies in the next few hours, because once the storm gets here, it will be not good conditions to continue to go out and try and prepare. Here is one of the ensemble looks at the storm, really just showing you the same thing as it moves off towards the north. It really is going to have some impact within the Tallahassee area, including the Appalachia Bay, likely a lot of storm surge in McCulloch County, the coastal parts of Jefferson County, Perry, where you have Dixie County. All of that area is going to be having possibly up to 10 feet of inundation, maybe even more, and your ensemble is saying much of the same thing. Possibly a little bit further to the east, so there is still a little bit of difference in these tracks here, but even still a lot more confidence than we had yesterday. Likely going to be a landfall somewhere on the northern part of Appalachia Bay, and Tallahassee likely to be at least somewhat impacted by this storm. So as we have, we're watching for Tallahassee, the probability of hurricane and tropical storm force winds is going to be fairly high within the area over the next, I would say, roughly 12 hours. We're watching tropical storm force winds going to start to impact the area over, we'd say, possibly starting even as early as midnight tonight. But we do have this area, water vapor, really showing how big this storm is, and it's just growing even further. Far outside the storm, going to be a Category 3, 125 miles per hour upon landfall here in Tallahassee. And all this sea surface temperature is really just helping this storm develop, unfortunately, as it moves further into the night and overnight hours. And that's what we're really watching for. How strong does it get? Well, we're going to have more details in about 30 minutes, and we'll continue to keep you updated on this storm.